All right, Rowe, welcome. Hello, everybody out there in YouTube, Facebook, and live streaming land. Welcome to the Permaculture Masterclass. Today, we are honored with the great Rosemary Morrow. Thank you so much, Rowe, for being here with us. It is our pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you for everyone who's attending today. It's really good to be talking to some American, United States colleagues because it's just such fun to talk to people who know what we're talking about. We have the same subject in common. So thank
Amen.
you very much for coming, and thank you, PINA, for organising this.
Oh, absolutely. It is our pleasure. And I'll give a more official introduction here and correct me if I have anything wrong, please, okay? So, hello, all, and welcome to today's Permaculture Masterclass, where we dive deep into the many rabbit holes that permaculture opens up for us. Just as the permaculture enthusiast eventually takes a PDC, the PDC graduate eventually goes deeper to levels of mastery and proficiency beyond the PDC. That's what this masterclass is all about. I am Jesse, and I'll be hosting today's conversation, which should last about 60 minutes. There will be space at the end for Q&A, so please post any questions you might have for Rowe in the comments, and I'll gather them up for the end. And today, as you know, we have Rosemary Morrow as we discuss bioregion-based permaculture, social permaculture design, how to teach and work with everyone, and much, much more. Rosemary Morrow is the author of the Earth User's Guide to Permaculture and the Earth User's Guide to Teaching Permaculture, as well as the excellent free new book, Permaculture Teaching Matters. Born in Perth, Australia, Rowe considers permaculture to be, quote, sacred knowledge to be carried and shared with others. Since then, and when asked, she has traveled to teach PDCs to others who, due to circumstances, could not access it in any other way. This took her to immediate post-war Vietnam, as well as Cambodia, Uganda, Ethiopia, and other countries. Understanding learning types and then offering teaching methods that incorporate processes and techniques for each student is a skill that needs to appear seamless. Quote, I like giving enough information to enable people to think and act in ways that match their potential. So first of all, Ro, thank you so much, and I want to extend my deepest gratitude to you on behalf of not really only the permaculture community worldwide, but really on behalf of humanity writ large. And I know that's a big compliment, but it's true for the work that you have done throughout your whole life on behalf of caring for the earth and caring for its people. So welcome and thank you once again.
Well, thank you, Jesse, and it's just great to be here with you. And as I said, to be with colleagues, and that's always wonderful. I'd just like to start with some words in the local Indigenous language, which is Watamai Nalawa Mitiga. And it is simply an acknowledgement that I'm on unceded land. They call it the biggest real estate grab in the world. There's a whole continent called Australia, never acknowledged, never paid for, and I hope we'll get to acknowledgement at least this year. So we are allowed to offer these welcome to country, and we're encouraged to do it. So I'm on Gundungurra land and would like to have people be welcome to that land. What it means is, please come in and sit down. Come into the circle. Watamai Nalawa Mitiga. Please come into the circle. So welcome you all today. Look, I won't muck around too much. I had a bit of a rocky road to permaculture, probably because it didn't exist. So even when I did agricultural science at university, there was still no ecology. So everything was studied according to little packets that weren't related to each other. Soil science wasn't related to the plant, wasn't related to the climate, wasn't related. So they called it reductionist science, but what it meant today, we'd say it was in silos. So I was old. I was 42 when I found permaculture, and it put together my anxiety that I was developing for growing food systems that weren't damaging, for restoring forests, for looking after water, and for caring for soils. So that's when I met it, I thought, this is it. Later on, of course, your Donella Meadows from the United States, who does systems work, gave me a name for it. I wanted a systems approach to design and to restoration and repair of the land. So it's just 50 years or 50 years plus 1 or 2 since Mollison and Holmgren came up with permaculture. And it's still difficult to give a short, decent definition. So for today, just while I review what's happened in those years, let's think of permaculture as a toolbox. So you can pull various things out of that toolbox and use it. So my definition is we hold in our heads and our hands, all of us, our heads and our hands, we hold the tools, and in our eyes, of course, the tools for restoring Earth, the whole Earth. We do know what needs to be done. And what seems to me incredible when I was thinking and speaking to you today was that permaculture put together 50 years ago such a comprehensive toolbox or bundle that we only have acquired more knowledge and better knowledge, and very little new material or topics, actual topics, have come on board. So let's think about, I always think of permaculture as being in, then when I open that toolbox, then I have a number of different areas. And I'm going to, the first one, of course, is our ethics. They haven't changed. So the care of the earth, which has to be primate, it has to be first. We don't care for the earth. I mean, it's not going to be much fun, those settlers on the moon, is it? We know about moonscapes. Not much green there. So if we don't care for the earth, that is us. And sadly, it's all the other plants and animals who have done nothing, and all the people who have lived simply. So those of us who've got permaculture now have a bit of a responsibility. We have the principles. There's been a little change in those to acknowledge Indigenous people, First Nations, and the history of the land before we came onto it. It's been added. The rest of them stay fairly constant. There is an overlap between David and Bill's. And if you want to do an exercise, you can match them. So they both say catch and store energy. They both say observe before you react. Observe and adapt, observe and interact, whatever it is, but that observation's there. They both talk about working on the margins. So there's a core group that they both share, and then Bill had some other ones which were quite interesting, which have turned out to be a bit prescient. It turns as if he knew how the world was going to be, because one is bring food production back to the cities. Because once there was food all through cities and around cities, and you could go out and there were, within walking distance, there were fields and orchards. So that appears to have gone. So given that in a few years, 70% of the world's people will be living in cities, if they're not now, what's permaculture got to say about that? Another one, and neither Bill nor David brought it in, but it's relevant this morning and now, is we have to think more about air quality as permaculturists and designing systems. I caught the world news this morning about the Canadians that are being evacuated because of the fires. But what they're actually talking about, most lives will be saved from the actual fire. The big thing is the air quality. And we learnt it again with COVID, air quality, getting circulation in rooms, getting air moving, keeping air clean. And that, I am forecasting, is going to become a bigger and bigger issue. So what we're talking about then is understanding some new things we need to bring into permaculture, really some very good marine permaculture, because it was mentioned lightly. But you permaculturists out there, I hope you're aware how much the oceans control and manage everything we do. Between the currents, between the North Atlantic, between the East-West Coast dipole, between La Nina and El Nino, all the climate's being thrown out, and much of it happens with the ocean-air interface. So this is the ocean, and then that interface, as the ocean warms up, all the rest goes into a spin and starts to break down. So it's not just the rain-bearing clouds or the dry clouds arriving on land. It's what's happening between the air and the ocean, the atmosphere and the ocean. That's having a huge effect on us. So we're going to have to think in all our designs, everything we do on land affects the ocean. Everything. So if you just throw a little bit of plastic on the ground, slowly and carefully, as Aldo Leopold wrote, in a few years or 100 years, it will reach the sea. So what we're looking at is trying to keep oceans clean, because everything polluting on the ocean happens on the sea. Okay, so these new areas, there's been some fabulous things happening in social permaculture, and I'll come to that in a minute. I just want to point out that we are losing our ecological literacy. So when we walked to school, when we walked to work, we caught the bus and didn't read a paper. When we looked out the window, when we sat out the front and looked at the sunset, or went out and watered gardens without putting on an automatic system, we were actually observing and understanding. We were becoming eco-literate. When we walked children to school, everything we did that was outside created eco-literacy. And some of us were better than others. We became passionate about birds or frogs or the clouds or anything, but our literacy was always growing, and it was much of our conversation. I'm seeing a huge drop in ecological literacy. Understanding water, understanding erosion, understanding climate. Just want to point out that in permaculture, once we've got our ethics and principles, and once we understand our ethics and principles, and we understand an ecosystem, and that might be an ecosystem in the canopy of the trees outside my window. That in itself is an ecosystem. I've recently had a big fight with local government. They wanted to put a walkway through a canopy. I said, but hang on, the birds are there, their eggs are there, the spiders are there, the microbats are there, the ringtail possums, the brush-tailed possums, all the birds that don't go to the ground, all the insects that the insect-eating birds live on, and half of them are asleep during the day. You can't have people tramping through that ground. You might as well have them tramping through a wetland. So understanding where the ecosystems are and what must be preserved is pretty important. So at the background of our understanding is the pattern that we see. We're pattern people. It's inherent in understanding water and soil is needed to make a plant grow. It's inherent that we need those three things. Then we need sun. And then we might need a windbreak. So we're building, layering all the time our knowledge, and we're bringing it together in one place and time to help things move. We must be able to see the pattern, and we must be able to see health everywhere. Health of a river, health in a tree, health in an orchard, health in chickens, health in wildlife. Are you able to look at the indicators and say, what is the health of what I'm looking at? This is a key question, because on that, you're going to make a design. So, of course, when we go through permaculture, we then do the first part, which is all about getting eco-literate. And we look at domestic water and rural water. I'm now saying we need to know about environmental water. What about our wetlands? What about our hanging swamps? What about our water below the ground? What about the water that sits down here under the soil and is held in the soil and in the aquifer? What about all this water? We're pumping it out of the ground very fast. We're drying it out in droughts. How conscious are we? My design, a student would have to go back and work out how to put more water into the ground and how to get it into the deeper system if it weren't in their design. I'm going to stop now. So what we need to do is be able to look at a pattern of any landscape, cultivated or natural. Is it degrading or is it restoring? So once we do that, we then have an idea where to go in design. I just wonder if there are any questions now. We're building on ethics, we're more than even principles, because ultimately you test everything against your ethics. Is it care for the earth? Is it care of people? Am I distributing surplus to need? I mean, people in the Middle East and Asia are very good on the third ethic. We Westerners, who are the richest, some of the richest people in the world, are quite poor at distributing surplus to need. So I noticed that again and again. We've grown up too individual. So I'm suggesting we go from me to we. So keeping that background there, me to we, understanding an ecosystem, working from ethics and seeing patterns, we're ready to go. So has anyone got a comment or anything they'd like to ask at this stage?
I love that, Rowe. And people are putting in some comments, but no questions yet. I'll let you know when we get one. I'm curious from your perspective, teaching folks with maybe low eco-literacy, how quickly do you find that people are able to pick up on it and it just becomes part of their natural being?
Well, I teach in chunks, so teach all this first chunk first. So that's what I call the foundation stone. That's solid. You know, they can test everything against ethics and trying to see a pattern. And I'll ask them, well, what's the pattern? And for a while they can't see it. Usually by about day 3, they're starting to wave their hands, Jess. So they're saying things like, well, north's over there. Sun comes up there. Oh. And then it goes down. Well, I don't really know. And then I get them to ask someone else and work it out together. So I get people to work. And then I'll ask them right on day 1 to do a sector analysis. Draw a map of your land, put north at the top, put the house on, and then ask them 50 questions. Where does the rain come? Where does the sun come? Where does the wind come? Where are the fences? Where are the pests coming from? What is the wildlife? Where is the shade? What's the fence made of? When do the summer rains come? When do the winter rains come? Is there any frost? Is there any fire? And they have to fill it in all around the edge of the paper. So around the edge, they've already started. And some will say, I don't know. How would I know? And I say, well, go home and find out. This is your homework. And only you can know for your place, because the place next door might have a big building or be different. So I'm building it through a teaching process. And then I ask them to look at the length of the shadow, and then we move into their land. And that's when we're getting into really becoming literate about soil and water and plants and climates and forests. So all the plants and what they're doing. So we're looking at that permaculture thing of how things function, we're not looking at the traditional way of looking at plants, you know, which genus and which species and what are we talking about. We're talking about what's that plant doing? And people say, what do you mean doing? Well, okay, is it providing shade? Is it giving you a leaf drop? Is it edible? Does it drop its leaves? What is it doing for you? And that's the way we're going to think about plants. And so we lead them in. At the end of the next few days, they can calculate how much water they need, where to put a tank, how to clean it, the different seasonality, storing surplus, and then we start on rural. So we start with the house and then how to meet its needs for water and energy and food and manage waste and natural building. So, you know, we're going systematically through, but all the time consistently building ecological knowledge. I think it's critically important for people to understand about climate and microclimate, because you can know your climate. What climate are you in, Jess? Everyone should know what climate they're in.
I'm in Michigan, so it's a temperate zone 6A.
Oh, what does 6A mean?
It means we get some very cold winters, down to -10 or so, and then we get some pretty warm summers up to 100 degrees or so.
Well, are you inland a bit?
I'm inland. I'm in the Great Lakes state, but I'm inland from the lake. So we have lake effect, but not as much as the West Coast does of our state.
So, for example, I'm Australian East Coast temperate at 1,000 meters high.
Oh, okay.
We get 6 light snowfalls a year, and it can get quite cold, but it doesn't go much over 25 degrees centigrade, forget that, in Fahrenheit, or very few days of freezing. The rest of it is cool temperate, but not as cool temperate as you. Now, the important thing is, if I want to know about my climate, I have to look up climate figures not for the last 150 years, but for 30, because the last 30 years show the greatest variability in climate. It's not precise, but it'll give you some of your highest figures, some of your lowest figures, some of the severe winds, droughts and floods. But 100 years will iron out the last 30 where climatic variability and turbulence has been increasing. So that is sort of new information we're bringing into permaculture. And that is based on some of the bureaus and what they're saying, the Meteorological Bureau. So we're using those same areas that Bill and David started, but as the climate is changing and the world is changing, for example, most people are going to live in cities, they won't have a house and land or the choice of 5 acres in the country. We have to see if permaculture will adapt to them. So that's an example. Another thing is about topography and understanding the impact of topography and building into your head a few principles to use when you're looking. If you're looking at land and water and there's a problem, you should start at the top. Just basic. Before the problem gets too big, go up there and divert it before it gets big. If you're doing regeneration of land, start at the top, because that's where your recharge is, to hold soil and water. You could be busy working along the bottom and the top is degrading. If you've got seeds coming down, they're coming from the top. So you always know in working with landscapes, that's where you're working from. And the unit of landscape design is your microclimate. It's not actually the climate. We take climate into our consideration, and then we want to build something that's climate modified, and that's your microclimate.
That's a good
So then your microclimate, you get detail. I can't hear you, Jess. What was that?
No, keep going. I don't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, it's okay. Have you got a thought there?
Well, I was thinking that that's a pretty good segue into the bioregion, because when we think about bioregions, it gets to be like, well, how could I design for a whole bioregion? It's huge. It's between a mountain and a big river, But maybe the key is if we each learn ecoliteracy and permaculture and we're doing our microclimate designs, that has a full effect on the bioregion over time. And we can switch to the slideshow whenever you're ready. But what are your thoughts on the bioregion? Because it's just so big.
Yeah. But ultimately, you could design on the level of the North American continent. You could zone it, wouldn't you? You'd take all the coastal and the Canadian boundary and Mexican boundary, and you'd have deep buffer forests for the sea, for the oceans. In some places, they'd be mangroves. In others, they might be casuarina. In others, but you'd put in those literal LITTORA, literal forest, and zone it. You'd do all the mountain areas in forest, inalienable, never able to be taken down. You'd do all your rivers and you'd buffer them for floods and droughts to keep the water clean, and you would let them flood very often. Right? Then you would take out really steep or marginal land. Then you're left with growing land. But you protected all your rivers, all your wetlands, all your coastal areas. You're buffered against drought. See, the whole continent can be put under zoning. So your sort of more marginal land might be those harvest forests for zone 4. The cities can be zone 0 and 1. So you can design on a backyard 14 metres by 14, and you can zone. You can put in at least one timber tree and a few native shrubs to get the indigenous animals and plants, or you can design a continent. So what's happened in the last 30, 40 years that I've been tramping around the world is I've been looking at so many places where people would have said to me years ago, it's too big to do a design, it's too small, or it's too crowded. And I would stop permaculture if that were true. You can design to absolutely any scale, but we Westerners have kidnapped permaculture and kept it in. We have some access to land, or we can buy a little farm, or we have a backyard or something. What I've been working with more is what I call the crowded margins. And if it doesn't work for them, it doesn't work for anyone. But when we think of a continent, we can divide that up into regions, basically similar climates and things. Then we break it down into our bioregion, and we say the bioregion is our social and economic region. That's the one we have to live in. I don't know about America, but France and Vietnam years ago were divided into bioregions, and when they said France had 365 cheeses, that was a symbol of a bioregional product that was local, that was adapted, that was saleable. So the bioregion is our economic region. The bioregion is where we put our energy. The bioregion is where we can go and harass local government and get them on side. Bioregions where we can really, in Australia anyway, elect people who will really act for the local area and are responsible. So whether you call that local government or county, what name do you have for it?
Yeah, local.
Those sort of bioregional areas, they're not always exactly.
Usually state government is what we often think of, but I like to think much more county, like our county level, we have much more influence over.
Yeah, so you start thinking like that. Once you think of that, that's where you want your design. Now, my experience is over the last 10, 15 decades, there's a real confusion between social permaculture, which is care of people, which means providing the sorts of things that people need to live well with freedom and access to good resources. Think of putting a plant in the ground. You can't actually make it grow yourself. You can't stretch that plant up and say grow leaf. You can provide water, you can provide protection, you can provide the nutrient. So you can take care of the plant so it's nurtured. Social permaculture means exactly that, taking care of people to provide the conditions under which they can grow and flourish. Whereas what I've found a lot in Europe, they think social permaculture is all about me and what I want to do, and if I want to do it, and whether I feel triggered or don't feel triggered, and I don't know if I want to do that. So it's become to a highly individual thing. That's your personal permaculture. That's not in the syllabus. You can have that at home, but honestly, I'm not interested. That's very rude of me. But you can have that with your neighbours and friends and clubs and whatever you want. What I'm interested in social permaculture, which is we in our bioregion. Us in our bioregion. We think it's us. You could get there on a bicycle, 10 kilometres or more. You could do some good market swap. You've got enough people to interact, but not everyone's on your doorstep. So if we think then about bioregions, we're thinking about these topics, right to land and right to perhaps even put a small house up. So in Cambodia, if someone's homeless, they can come and bring a little house on the back of an ox cart and put it up in your backyard till they find somewhere else to live. A little house. And they have a right to do that. And when you think of our land laws and what's required to build a house or put a second thing on, you know, you nearly die in the bureaucracy, don't you? Talk about the tangled web. Anyway, so there must be the right to land. And then there is the need to write an ethic for your own land. So I don't know. I would get people to say how they will care for their land. If people are listening to this, they should be thinking now, what's the ethic I've got for my land? I won't bring plastic here. I will recycle all my waste. I will clean my grey water. You know, what responsibilities are you taking that land's going to be better off? So then we've got our organisations. So these organisations can reduce us to nothing. So we're just simply yesing and knowing and doing what we're told, or we can have organisations that we can really work. Do we own our banks? Do we have cooperative banks? Can we prevent big banks taking them over? Do we own our own food co-ops? We've got a wonderful food co-op here. It's absolutely terrific. And so they say no genetically modified food, no chemicals, local growers, proven something, and we pay all our growers well. So it's a little bit expensive, but I'm paying the true price of the food. And they've run a garden, and we've got Farm It Forward. So what we're doing is supporting those people who are practicing permaculture principles and providing the structures. So that would be banks, that would be schools. We've got a local school that all year 11 and 12 is going to be totally devoted to permaculture and the environment in every topic. It's just been granted through the education department.
That's great.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Then what do we do about disasters? We have to work together. It's a community thing. It's a local thing. And we have to get ready beforehand. Don't wait. Local government might run out of resources. We have to organise ourselves. It could be a fire, a flood. It can be another worse pandemic. We don't know. It could be a breakdown of world economies. We have no idea, but they're all possibilities. So what then do we do in disaster? Our workplace is a communal place. Can we green work? Can we have good buying policies? We're not going to buy from these people. We're not going to buy. Don't send stuff with plastic packaging. And so you start making demands on those people back up the chains where we end up with the junk. So we end up with the junk, but we have to send that demand. Don't send us this, don't send us that. We're not having Coke. We're going to have good juice produced locally. We're going to have soups made locally for lunch. We're going to meet outside. We're going to turn that parking area into a green place, and all our meetings will be out under trees. Will we go up on the roof? Will we go out to the balcony? How can we get ourselves more involved? So, you know, work is critical because more and more people work inside, and unless we transform those workplaces, it's pretty serious. So the other thing is urban permaculture has gone absolutely fantastically big. It's no longer your state or your government that's going to pull back on climate change. It's going to be some cities. And you've got, you've got Seattle. You've got other cities, haven't you? We've got northern New South Wales. Canberra's going for zero waste completely for a state. We've got people refusing to cut old growth forests ever again, whole states. We've got things happening here where our pressure and our organisation. But it is the cities that we need the real transformation. We need all that glass going into buildings to be containing chips for produce solar energy. We need to green things enormously, and we can do it in small spaces. We need to shade black streets covered in tar. Let's have a look at some pictures. Yeah. I hope you're getting. Oh, there's a green city.
These are beautiful pictures, by the way, Rowe. Who was the animator of these?
Oh, well, you see. Yes, I can't see you. I can just see it says my MacBook. But during COVID, I rewrote my book to bring it up to date, and it's called Earth Restorer's Guide to Permaculture, because restoration is what we do. I can't see you Yes.
Oh, have I disappeared from you? Sorry about that. Can you see the pictures?
I've got a notice saying Rowe's MacBook, but I can't see anything else.
What if we do this? We can just come back.
Oh, hang on. It looks as if I might.
Oh, I think I lost Rowe.
Go back again.
There you
can
are.
Give me a drawing now. Yeah, so look to leading cities because they are leading the way. And there are a couple of harbours leading the world because harbours are disgusting and filthy and hidden and we don't watch them. There's one in Amsterdam. But anyway, let's have a little look at some of the pictures, see if we can get some ideas. So that's Rob Alsop. I took 2 years to rewrite my book. It's this thick. It's a doorstop. Yeah. We are the restorers because no one else has our knowledge, do they? We are the ones with knowledge of permaculture, knows how to restore across ecosystems. Yeah, so we'll have a little look at the next slides. I've only got the first one. And the first thing you do is just a sector analysis of your bioregion. So the circle is the bioregion. The black tells you what's going out. I mean, you know this sector analysis from doing it for a site or your land. And then the grey are what are coming in. State laws or governance or some money, the environment. And so you do that to understand where the leaks are, because everything leaks out of the bioregion generally. Money and timber and goods. And New York exports waste and human waste and plastic mainly. That's its biggest export. Okay, let's move on, please, Tess. So let's look at it. The essence of making a bioregion work, they're going to be, remember your patterns, your nodes, the whole health system, the arts, the media, the schools, the governance, and finance. Now, we need to manage all these ourselves. So, and they are all linked. So the arrows are the links and the others are the nodes. So every individual needs to be locked into, no, connected in. Think of your network pattern, not the dendritic pattern, not the one that's top down, but your network pattern. And that applies to individuals and to our organisations. Okay, let's go a bit more. Right, the main thing we want to ask is that all businesses are ethical. So you can check out my book, but I took this one from here to show you how Lush Cosmetics source edible products, make quality products, recycle materials, refuse to be bought out by big names, partly company owned, no big media advertising. They donate to grassroots. So they've been big donations for us getting young Afghans to safety who were working in permaculture. So where our permaculturalists in Afghanistan were in danger, we brought them out and Lush has been generous. Fabulous model of an ethical business. Okay, let's go on. Make sure your businesses are ethical. Everyone has the right to land for food and housing. So in that case, you're going to look around and you're going to find out what you can do to encroach on or use your local pieces of land. Plant trees, become a guerrilla planter and invade. Because we need to grow our own food. There's going to be a huge shortage in 10 to 15 years due to land breakdown, chemicals and climate emergency. Oh dear, the wheels are off the train, I just noticed. Okay.
I want to highlight that you said invade. I love that. So
yeah, we're going to invade and we're going to occupy. Okay, let's go on. This is your bioregion. Right, let's retrofit cities. So cities are generally big junkies. They bring in lots of plastic. They get rid of lots of junk. They put out polluted water. They're noisy. The air quality is shocking. So let's think about using our zoning methods to retrofit a whole city, not just an apartment or apartment block, but we have to do those. Let's go. So let's green, there you are. That's the one we looked at before. Everything we can do, we have some food or a pot plant or a place, and we green it all up. Okay, let's go. Now, for that same city we looked at before, that's the same one that was very polluted. That is an example of how Zone 1 and 2, the suburbs and community gardens, instead of having an industrial area, we green the industrial areas or we make them green. So they might be recycling cardboards, they might be swap shops, they're your green zone, Zone 3, and their industries. Bring lots of water back in lakes and wetlands. Let's have some managed forests, and let's make sure all our energy is renewable for the whole city. And let's have city farms, because they are fantastic. I just visited one the other day, an old tip site, and they've made a most fabulous farm there. They've got a balcony, a false balcony set up, and they've got a false rooftop set up to show people how they can farm urban areas.
I will say for North America that seems to be the single most applied version of greening the cities and permaculturing the cities is urban farms. That's very popular in America and Canada, I believe, as well.
Yeah, there's also another name for micro farms as well. Yes, you're famous for that, Jess, I know, because I understand there are 10,000 farms and gardens in New York. There probably needs to be 2 million. So there you are, for people living there, they've got a goal. Okay, let's look at another one. Let's calm the neighbourhoods. I think these drawings say it sufficiently for you. I probably don't have to. You can see what happens. Traffic has to be calmed. That means you slow it down and green it and change transport. I'm going to put a sign up on my street saying local traffic only. It's not illegal to do that. So I've learned, so that's what I'm going to do. And then I'll have a calmer street. And my street is also Zone 5 actually, and I've got something called a bowerbird that collects blue, busy building a nest out there.
Are you familiar with city repair and intersection repair work done in, I think, Portland, Oregon, in the United States?
Yeah, it'd be good to find more examples in the United States. There must be lots and lots, I think.
Turning intersections into places of naturally cars going slow because of the design of the intersection, places of celebration, places of community. I mean, weddings being held in intersections within the city. And I think this whole calm neighborhood idea speaks a lot to the psyche and the mental stress that we live within. Because if you're talking about most of people living in cities, well, one thing that often accompanies cities is mental stress, and just like you're not being assaulted by bird sounds and water sounds, but rather traffic and noise at all hours. So I think that this is really critical to like mental well-being as well as, a functioning city.
Yeah, so we know how to calm neighbourhoods. I mean, some of Sydney, they just locked off small streets, tiny little ones, and turned them into parks. So if you give priority to pedestrians, then you have to slow the traffic. You can I'm building out into my street a little bit to make it narrower, and then they'll go slower, even though they don't go very fast because it's a rural area. But I'm just going to slow it down some more. And the street's ours to play in and do things, or bicycles, or slowly come and go. But it doesn't belong to all those others. Okay, there's a lot on calm neighbourhoods. In my new book, it gives you lots of references. Now, here's an idea. They built this in Melbourne, and it came from Nepal and Switzerland and the French Alps, where you build a vertical city farm. So you're several layers of farm, and you start at the bottom and you have your bicycles. So your ground floor is your bicycles and chickens. That one's got a goat. It'd have to be walked every afternoon. You might have a little bit of aquaculture, and that was your former garage. You go upstairs and you've got your sitting room, and it's green both sides. and your quiet bedrooms higher up with better quality, and then the top is your garden. So think of farming vertically, and I think it could work very well. Because in where I was in France, they have all the barn, the animals at the bottom. They pull all the straw up to the ceiling, and that's insulation. And then they have lovely windows to the south where they grow masses of things on balconies. And they do this where the land's very, very steep. But it adapts so well to a city, a vertical city farm. Huge potential. Right, and then you can go to intentional communities. Now this is all social permaculture, where you working with groups. The idea of these is you don't let the houses encroach on too much land and keep them to less than 25% of the land. And from that you can get pretty sustainable. So your intentional community then writes its ethics, it works out its land use, it keeps its cars from going very far into the area, just close to the houses. So you don't turn it into another city or village. You make sure that you're grouping things. Cars and houses are both polluting, enormously polluting. You can think of a house as a junkie, actually, bringing in energy and water and putting out pollution and polluted air and plastic and junk. And car parks are very bad for areas, so control it. Okay, so I mean, you can easily do these designs. Now, I think you know David's done, I'm sorry the print's so small. I think you know David's done a really good book called Retrofitting the Suburbs.
Retro Suburbia.
And this is the place where because you've got a little bit of land, because you've got grey water, because you've got waste, that's the riches and resources that you really want to actually green an area enormously. But try to make it not just my place, but can we do my street? Can we do our backyards? Could we eventually have just solar batteries in a shed, and we can all have the panels on our roof, and we'll have the big batteries in there, and we'll have standalone distributed energy. Certainly I've got ponds and tanks in my backyard, and they're available to anyone here in a drought. So start thinking of that unit all the time, the we, not me, and how it can best serve the area. Rob, who did this design, he's got oranges in his main street, and so they have in Portugal. Teach everyone, right? This is us. This is a refugee camp in Bangladesh, and this is what it looked like. But everyone, meaning the children, hung round. The man came every day with his cow when he was taking it to graze. The person on the tractor thing in the brick factory, he came over and listened. The chickens walked through, and we had babies in the class, but teach everyone. No exclusions at all to learning permaculture. If they don't know because they've come late, you just say, will anyone help them in the break? When you're having lunch or when you're having a break, please go and tell someone what they've missed. Okay, another one. Right, let's work with everyone. So this is work that I've been doing for the last 5 years. The other thing is, I started this when I was 75 years old. I'm now 80. I decided if permaculture works for crowded areas and war zones and occupied zones, then it should work in refugee camps. So up there on the top left, that's a typical refugee camp set out on the Roman grid. Often tents, sometimes they're those big containers. And we get people to design one, then they have to teach all the other people how to design. On the right, you can see what the design looked like. So they'll be using the blue tents from UNHCR. Plastic is massive in these camps. So they'll use the plastic bottles hanging from trees, plastic bottles hanging from windows, jars and plastic hanging from the roof. They'll grow pumpkins on the roof to keep it cooler. they'll try to clean that black slimy water full of sewage that flows through the middle of the camp, and it actually is massive effective and people love it. So again, it's social permaculture. We're working with groups of people who are doing it all the time, and we're stretching the people who know. Okay, another one. There's a city. You could green that, couldn't you? Look at the junk they've used. There are lots of plastic water bottles, lots of bits of old wire, lots of old sacks that might have been used from the shops for coffee or sack gardens. I think you'd know those. Use all your roof space to hang from the roof. Grow in every fraction of land you can get. Clean up the waterways, and you can see how easy it is really. And once it starts, it just grows and grows. We started with 20 people in Bangladesh, and at the end of, I think, 3 weeks, 1,800 were asking for seed to do something similar. So, work socially. Yep, next one, please, Jess. Now, look, this is stolen from Hong Kong. This was a 30-story building, and they said a building is just a community standing upright instead of on its side. So let's take the bottom 3 or 4 floors of every building. We'll have gardens, we'll have an op shop, we'll have recycling, we'll have notices, we'll have a coffee shop, we'll have a laundry, we'll have selling, we'll have everything that you would find in a community. We'll use the bottom floors for, and we'll try and get rid of the cars. So those 2,000 or more people in that building can come right down to having all this stuff happening where they go in and out and bringing it and in their own interest. So it's a fabulous idea. I don't know what's happened since mainland China took over Hong Kong, but I saw this working so well. Okay, now this is the big one. What do you do with your money? We have to think of ethical money. We have to think of it having social value, value for materials, ecology, cultural, for experience, and intellect. Most of my money, or most of my capital, probably is social, some for cultural. Yeah, I'm less interested in money as being only what's in the bank. Do you know most people have got superannuation? 80% of them die with their super pretty much in touch, but they've saved up for having it when they're old, and then when they're old they can't spend it. So look at what else you have. I have huge intellectual property because I've visited so many people and seen so many farms, and I can read and write, and I was given scholarships. So I'm very rich. I'm not that smart, but I'm rich. I'm a Quaker. That's really spiritual capital, right? This is what we've got to change from being capitalist to something else. Think of your donut economy. In the middle are all the people who can't afford things. Food, education, health, housing. In the middle are what everyone should get. When you use too much, that's when you break the boundaries. And the other social permaculture, we have to work with the planetary boundaries as communities and not break those. That's ocean acidification, water resources, land conversion, biodiversity. They are ours to work with those UN, and we must work with the Sustainable Development Goals. If we do that, we stay in the middle with enough for all. Otherwise, once we break climate change, the ocean acidifies, pollution, the world will break down globally. So permaculture, of course, buffers us from that and gives us time to get it right. But it does mean we have to work with these groups and keep it. This is the one I love, is the gift economy, where there's no money, or you just give a bit, or you give everything. So in the gift economy, we can share, we can lend, we can trust, we can donate, but what we must do is get our needs met. So someone turned up yesterday and brought me a big pile of avocados and kiwi fruit. I lent someone something. I can give a lot of stuff out of my garden, And on the whole, for the last 5 years, I haven't accepted money for anything professionally. And I have about $500 a week in Australia, a mixture of government pension and a little bit of superannuation, and I have enough. So I've hit the gift economy. I have enough. Now I can do all these other things, but it's based on trust. And if someone lets it down, it's just too bad, isn't it? But most people won't. And on the whole, people bring you more. Let's look at the circular economy that we can bring into our communities and our bioregion. We can make it, we can use it, we can reuse it, we can remake it, we can recycle it, and we can make it again. So the really important thing is to think of a circular economy, not a profit economy. Not to increase the dollars, but to increase the way we use all the materials. So that, remember, multifunction, multi-purpose, think innovatively. There's now a huge thing about clothes, and I think that's really important. About once you've made it, remake it, reuse it, remake it, reuse it, so it doesn't go into waste. Because my generation's the one that used most of the world's resources. Now here's our bioregional money. Most of it goes out. So what we want to do is we want to stop it, the bank sending it off to New York, London, Paris and Sydney every week to invest in mining and unethical business and forestry. We want to stop it going out for furniture and TVs and junk. We want to stop it going out for imports. We want to stop it going out. So if we can keep the money in the bioregion and we use the fact that money can go around, then we're all wealthier. So we must patronise each other, support each other and use each other's services. Okay, we must be nearly there. The workplace. You could do better than that with the design, but that's the beginning. No, we don't sit up in the third story. We go and walk into the park and sit down and have a picnic. Okay, another one. Here it is. Have a purchasing policy. Right? So we have a pot plant. We have local things. We have local juices. We bring soup. And finally, we add value. We make sure all our industry, here's a grapevine. And how many ways can you make it? Probably there are 10, 12 ways you can add value. You don't have to do them all, just choose a few. So these are ways that we can enrich and develop and build on our bioregions. And it's going to be critical we do it. So thank you for being here. I hope you've got strong ideas. I hope you've got questions. And we are the world. We are the ones, we Permies, who can do all these things, or we can know about them effectively and well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rowe. Wow, that was a whirlwind. I love that. That was amazing.
It was huge, wasn't it? Too big, I think.
It was a big gulp, but it was wonderful. And it just endlessly reminds me of how practical permaculture is. You just sit here and go, well, these are just obvious. Like, this is obviously the way that we should design our civilizations and our cities and our bioregion. I do wonder, like, what you think about the things that get in the way. What do we do when we have policies that get in the way, or governments that get in the way, or neighbors that get in the way, and they're like, I don't want to do any of that permaculture stuff? How do you work with the challenges in implementing these types of things?
Right, we work a bit with local government, so we haven't got a McDonald's in my town. And we don't really want it because of the litter, and we brought in foods and stuff all arrives in containers, and we've got tons of food in Australia anyway. So what we did, we just fought it in courts until we said we haven't got enough parking, and we won it on that. So we do have to go to law every now and again, but basically we get our local government to change. And what do? We try to get laws changed. So we've had laws changed about wetlands. We've got a lot of hanging swamps and wetlands here. You're not allowed to build on them. You have to protect them. We've had that law changed. But we couldn't do it on state level. We've only got 6 states and they're huge and powerful. We have to fight off the developers, because then we're in the mountains with great views. They want to put up huge buildings. We have to go back and say, no, we need something different. So we're constantly, we are activists. And the USA used to have the Permaculture Activist magazine, and so many of us are really fighting for, when we're all up there on a cloud, not the cloud with the computer stuff, there's another cloud for permaculturists when we fall off our twig, right? When we all pass on, we go to a cloud in the sky where there are no computers and Wi-Fi, and up there we look down and say, I'm glad I fought for that. I'm glad I worked for that. I'm glad my life wasn't just useless getting and getting more. I'm glad I didn't waste too much. I think we need to think how future generations will, and our families and our friends will talk at us. I mean, it's not for that alone, that could be a vanity, but it is a measure of being engaged, not just for ourselves, but for others. Yeah.
Yeah, and the simple idea of like, have we left the earth better than when we found it, to the degree that we inhabited our landscape? I agree 100%. Ladies and gentlemen who are listening live, if you have any questions for Rosemary, please put them in the chat about really anything. I think we can kind of go anywhere with it. We want to be mindful of your time, Ro, so if you got to just go, let us know. But we'll maybe go for another 10 minutes or so.
That would suit me perfectly. I've got this Indian educator arriving, taking to an alternative school.
Okay, perfect.
To see the gardens, yeah.
And then I'm going to put a question out to our audience and those who are watching live, but also those who might see this later. That's something that you actually brought up, Rowe, which is, where are the refugees going from the border of Mexico when they go into the United States, or any border really? But where do the refugees end up? Are there hot spots in the North American continent? I didn't know the answer to that, and Rowe was kind of asking about that. And then the follow-up is, what permaculturists are meeting them there and teaching them and sort of trying to give them the skills and the knowledge that we know permaculture can give. So if anybody sees this at any later date, please reach out to me at programs@PINA.com, and I would love to know those answers. And then maybe we can have Rowe back to talk more about how to work with refugees, how to work with people who are the poorest amongst us. That might be a later conversation. I see a question. Is that presentation available anywhere? This will be recorded and then be made available to PINA members, and it'll be turned into a podcast as well. Now, in terms of the graphics that you're showing, Rowe, is that from your book? And what book would people buy for that?
Yeah. So the book's called Earth Restorer's Guide to Permaculture. It's from, I'm really hopeless at branding or marketing or anything. If you don't like it, it's a good book, stop. But it's 512 pages, and I've written it trying to look into the future. We'll have to be able to deal with cities, we'll have to deal with air quality, we have to deal on land with marine pollution. We have to start looking at not just windbreaks, but actual effective forests. So what I've tried to do is put into that something a little bit future looking, but also looking at some of the most disadvantaged people. So that's Meliadora Publications, which is David Holmgren's group, and Rob Alsop is the artist, and Rob is totally impractical. That's a secret to everyone listening, but he would love it if you were able to buy a whole set of 300 drawings from him for about $100. So it's very cheap.
Wow, yeah. That's great. So, and if you haven't read Rosemary's book, it's absolutely essential, I think. And I don't know. I think it's the best teacher's guide to have when you're teaching a PDC for yourself, just personally. Now, I've not taught millions of PDCs like some people, but I think it's an indispensable guide, especially the follow-up to that, which was the teacher's guide.
Yeah. Well, we're about to... So there were two things. There was just the Book of Knowledge, which was called Earth Users Guide, but I always wanted to be Earth Restorers. We are the Earth Restorers.
We are.
When we're good permaculturists, we're almost like the indigenous people, able to work with our landscape without destroying it. And that's Meliadora Publishers, 2 L's, I think. And I can give you can put up my email. I'm happy to have people contact me if they want to.
Okay, I'll share that. And we have a question coming in here, Rowe. And now this we could go on for hours, I suppose, but are there any specific examples or stories that come to mind?
Look, I have so many stories, And they're often, so in Afghanistan in 2017, I taught a course and they were all young Afghan peace volunteers. And the person who did the interpreting for me, he started to work with the local school. He was teaching the teachers. The teachers were putting it into their curriculum. This was a little school with 3-metre high mud walls, and the playground was asphalt about 2 metres wide and no water. And he built ladders up onto the roof and built a whole garden there, and was about to start the first NGO by Afghans for Afghans when the Taliban came in and they were after him. So Qasim fled. He spent a year living in limbo in Pakistan, has just arrived in Portugal, and is continuing his love and dedication. But you know, Afghanistan's just lost all its permaculturists. So in Ukraine and in Afghanistan and in Syria, the permaculturists all left, or many did. Though I was talking to some in Ukraine the other day, and Europeans are going into Ukraine to help them rebuild glass houses to grow food and get community gardens going where land is too dangerous, but also they've offered homes to permaculturists. So Permaculturists for Refugees is making those links, and we want to link with people working with refugees in North America anywhere. So there's Qasim, there's Alina. All she wants to do is grow food. I mean, their stories are horrific of family murdered and killed and terrible voyages, and then they come out and they're doing permaculture. In Greece, it was someone in that course, a Greek person, because we have some local residents come into the camp, and the refugees and the NGO, 3 groups of people together in a class of 30. Mainly refugees and local people and the NGO who invite me in. When we go home, they do what they want to do. They start translating books, doing lessons, making gardens. I give them $2,000 each, Australian, nothing, and say do a project. 2 years later, they're still doing projects. They started an NGO on Lesbos. In addition, they're teaching teachers. They're teaching Iraqis in the refugee camps. There must be 500,000 people there. Noorani, Sundas was a refugee from Yemen who ended up in Malaysia. Malaysia's got 5 million refugees, mainly from Myanmar, and there's 1 million in Bangladesh or more. But Sundas then got a chance to go to Canada. She started sending permaculture lessons home to Yemen, to her village and family, to use as the country was being destroyed by the civil war there and post-war. So she's writing materials and documents and sending them back. Some of the refugees now safe are writing emergency first aid booklets and emergency garden booklets in Dari and Farsi and all those languages, and sending them back into Afghans where people are starving. So it's out of control. People are doing what they want to do when they want to do, and my computer gets packed with good, fabulous, positive stories. I mean, wonderful things. I could get so excited, and when it came to writing the report, Permaculture Works with Refugees, at that point, I couldn't classify them because they were so original and so amazing. All the different, if children are not allowed to go to school in that country, as in Turkey, in secondary school, then they start a permaculture school for the kids and start teaching them in their own languages. If they go home one day to Syria, you can imagine. I mean, I just go on and on and on. You know, who's doing what and with whom. And Habiba, she's in Spain now. She's regularly training trainers, and there's a permaculture training for refugees now, the last course. So Cameroon have set up their own organisation to teach permaculture to Cameroon refugees in Europe. Look, I can't stop. I'm going to stop.
It's so inspiring. It's the most inspiring thing I've heard in a long time. because being in North America, being in Michigan, you kind of just get used to your own environment. You don't realize what's going on in the rest of the world. You don't realize how permaculture is being received by people in literally the most dire of situations. And it sounds
Yeah,
like it's being received quite well, and it's maybe the most empowering thing that we can provide people in those situations.
yeah, yeah.
That's
There's a
unbelievable.
website, permacultureforrefugees.org. It's
Mm,
got all the reports. If you want to teach refugees, why teach refugees? Permaculture works the final document. Yeah, it's just going on. We're now teaching NGOs who are permanently in camps, so they've all got it.
that's
They
amazing.
may just go on for years or they go to a new camp or something. Yeah.
Wow. Well, Rowe, we've reached the end of our time. We have to have you back. We got to talk more about internal refugees and how we might get North America maybe sort of moving in that direction. And I'm sure many permaculture teachers are already moving in that direction. We want to know who you are out there, and we want to talk to you, and we want to share ideas with each other. Rowe's got a tremendous amount of knowledge and expertise to bring to the North American continent. So thank you, thank you, thank you, Rosemary. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, I tried to revise and bring up to date a little bit over 50 years, but my heart's with refugees. Someone else will be forests or food forests, but
That's right.
that's not.
We need
It
them
was
all.
a wonderful opportunity to be with you today, and anytime in the future, Jess, it was really, really fabulous. Thank you
And
so much.
Oh, it was absolutely our pleasure. And with the Blue Mountains, let me make sure I got this right. Blue Mountain Permaculture Institute.com. Is that where you would send people ideally to connect with you, or where else?
I think permacultureforrefugees.org, Blue Mountains Permaculture.org, or the third one was Amelia Dora for the book. And for contact with Rob, if people would like to buy the drawings and use them. By the way, those drawings blow up to A1, this big beautifully without distortion. If you speak another language, you can just lift the caption off and put your own language on.
Wow, that's amazing. I'll have to get that email from you so I can send it to our people, because that sounds like a great resource.
Okay, I'll send them to you later. Thank you so much.
That sounds
Thank you,
lovely.
Rowe. Hope to see you one day.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
I hope to meet you in person, Rowe. Have a great day.
That was lovely. Thank you. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And thanks so much for all your organising.